We are live and a minute late because I
Yay!
distracted you with the Book of the New Sun discussion.
That's okay. That's
Anyway,
okay. Like I said, I decided that's going to be my Christmas present to myself. I'm actually going to read another book series because
although
it's
to be fair, it's a book series that heavily influenced this one, so with a lot of similarities.
yeah, but that one's complete, right?
Oh yeah. In fact, the original series, Sammy, quiet. The original Sammy, the original series. He said multiple times he finished the fourth book before publishing the first book.
Well, that's a bonus. Okay, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So the main series is 4 books, and there's some sequels too. Hey, Sammy,
okay.
quiet. Come here. Be quiet. Sorry about
Both shirts count today. The pup agrees. Agrees.
that. All right, sounds good.
All right. Before we get too further, I'm old new dude. He is.
Richard York, Asher's trueborn son.
And in all honesty, I only have 84 subscribers. So,
Yeah. We've
yeah,
already discussed this.
we got a while for that 200 party.
Or 100
But
party.
to be fair, we'll have a one day maybe a 100 subscriber party. You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
So we have Jamie on Hump Day. So Hump Jamie, and take it away, Richard.
Storm 21, Jamie 3, the sword coupling chapter, and Jamie screamed. 2 days' ride to either side of the King's Road, they passed through a wide swath of destruction. Miles of blackened fields and orchards where the don't you hey yeah, quiet. Anyway, sorry about this.
It's okay.
Miles of
They say never work with children or animals, so I understand.
yeah, and we've got a guy who's hanging some Christmas lights for us. But anyway, miles of blackened fields and orchards where the trunks of dead trees jutted into the air like archers' stakes. The bridges were burnt as well, and the streams swollen by autumn rains, so they had to range along the banks in search of fords. The nights were alive with the problem here is that the puppy barks and then Sammy barks. Anyway, the nights were alive with howling of wolves, but they saw no people and with barking of dogs. But anyway, at Maidenpool,
Hey, those
Lord Newton's
howling
friends.
wolves would be Nymeria, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the wolf pack. Yeah, the giant wolf pack that she's assembling. At Maidenpool, Lord Mooton's red salmon still flew above the castle on its hill, but the town walls were deserted, the gates smashed, half the homes and shops burned or plundered. They saw nothing living but a few feral dogs that went slinking away at the sound of their approach. The pool from which the town took its name, where legend said that Florian the Fool had first glimpsed Jonquil bathing with her sisters, was so choked with rotting corpses that the water had turned into a murky gray-green soup.
Hey, is this one of those towns that the people are hiding?
We actually hear about this. Sammy loves Jamie. We actually hear about this. I'm pretty sure that this is the guy that the older brother is not wanting to forgive. Septon Maribald wants to forgive him, and the elder brother is less prone to forgiveness. I think this is the spot.
Okay.
I think this is the spot that we hear about that story.
Okay.
Jamie took one look and burst into song. 6 maids there were in a spring-fed pool. What are you doing? Brienne demanded. I decided to go with the Mockingbird Hush Little Baby song. Anyway.
There you go.
That's literally the only lyrics in the entire even though we hear about the song a few times, that's literally the only lyrics we get. So anyway.
It works.
Singing. What are you doing? Brienne demanded. Singing. 6 maids in a pool. I'm sure you've heard it. And shy little maids they were, too, rather like you, though somewhat prettier, I'll warrant. Be quiet, the witch said, with a look that suggested she would love to leave him floating in the pool among the corpses. Please, Jamie, pleaded Cousin Cleos. Lord Mooton is sworn to Riverrun. We don't want to draw him out of his castle, and there may be other enemies hiding in the rubble. Hers or ours? They are not the same, cuz. I have a yen to see if the wench can use that sword she wears. If you won't be quiet, you leave me no choice but to gag you, Kingslayer. Unchain my hands, and I'll play mute all the way to King's Landing. What could be fairer than that, wench? Brienne, my name is Brienne. 3 crows went flapping into the air, startled at the sound. Care for a bath, Brienne? He laughed. You're a maiden, and there's the pool. I'll wash your back. He used to scrub Cersei's back when they were children together at Castle Rock. Jamie seems to associate bathing with Brienne with bathing with Cersei. Why could that be?
I was just getting ready to say the same thing.
The wench turned her horse's head and trotted away. Jamie and Sir Cleos followed her out of the ashes of Maidenpool. A half-mile on, green began to creep back into the world once more. Jamie was glad. The burned lands reminded him too much of Ares. She's taking the Duskendale road, Sir Cleos muttered. It would be safer to follow the coast. Safer, but slower. I'm for Duskendale, cuz. If truth be told, I'm bored with your company. You may be half Lannister, but you're a far cry from my sister. Sorry, Cleos, if they listen to you, both you and Jamie might still be in one piece. Sammy, quiet. Shh, quiet. He could never bear to be long apart from his twin. Even as children, they would creep into each other's beds and sleep with their arms entwined. Even in the womb. Long before his sister's flowering or the advent of his own manhood, they had seen mares and stallions in the fields and dogs and bitches in the kennels and played at doing the same. Once their mother's maid had caught them at it. He did not recall just what they had been doing, but whatever it was had horrified Lady Joanna. She'd sent the maid away, moved Jamie's bedchamber to the other side of Castle Rock, set a guard outside Cersei's, and told them that they must never do that again, or she would have no choice but to tell their lord father. They need not have feared, though. It was not long after that she died, birthing Tyrion. Jamie barely remembered what his mother had looked like.
Hey, I got a quick
Let's
question.
do this. I got a long paragraph to discuss. Anyway, this paragraph right here. Go on.
Well, you were talking about last time the birthing hips and narrow hips, and well, we get a lot of references in the story of people that look similar swapping places. You got Cersei and Jamie. You got potentially Myrcella and her cousin swapping places. There's a lot of references of people swapping places, especially when the person that is observing them doesn't know what the original person looked like. So, I mean, it just made me think even more so that the Rob's widow is definitely swapped. Sorry.
Okay. No, that's fine.
That paragraph made me think of it. Sorry.
Well, speaking of swaps, no. Speaking of swaps, let's do this. Okay. So Lenora Hill was not much older than her true-born sister, and if she were drugged, sliced open, and covered with blood, would look a lot like her sister. Later in this book, the author will highlight that it made no sense for Oberyn's mother, let's call her Princess Septa Scalera, to visit when she did, and that she did so with a cabin prepared for a highborn guest when there was zero chance Jamie or Cersei would be returning with her. The twincest indicated Joanna's children were secret bastards, so she had her people drug and kill her relative to cover up the twincest and the secret bastards. Why does that sound so familiar? The idea that Jamie didn't even acknowledge his bastard aunt as anything but a maid makes perfect sense given how narcissistic he and his sister were. See Triplet Targaryen's episode 5. Joanna Lannister is alive by Reddit user The Sullied, also known as Gods of Terror on Tumblr, and at Loki Ragnarok on Ragnaraki on Twitter.com. And for why we know Princess Septa Scalera is Oberyn's mother, see Toodle's Secret History of House Martell, Chapter 2. So there's a whole bunch of tinfoil there.
Yeah. You know me, I love some tinfoil.
And he thought, perhaps Joanna is out there. Yeah, I mean, we know it's not a dream. She tells us it's not. And yeah. If you really look at how he describes her age, he kind of settles on 50 as her age, right? He starts off with her young and says she could be like 16 or whatever he says, or 50. And so usually when you do that, you're going towards the correct age when you finally realize it, right? And so the implication is that she looks 50 once he gets better, once he stops to think about it more, and that she's alive, and that it's not a dream. So it creates that parallel. It creates a parallel with the dream. With so each one of a lot of our characters seem to have these dreams of people that are. It's not hard to be someone else in disguise. Just ask Nicolas Cage and John Travolta. Okay.
Face off.
Yeah, you can just swap faces, no problem. Anyway, at least in this story,
in this book, you can. You
Right,
can do that
glamour
definitely
or
in this book.
faithless man, or yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Uh, um,
Well, I mean, stop and think about one thing though. In that scene in the Sept of Baelor, how does she know what he dreams
no,
like?
he's in the Riverlands. We've talked about this before. He's in the
No, no, no.
Riverlands during
I'm
that.
talking about when he's standing um, vigil over his father's body, and his mother comes to visit him. She says,
I don't think that does happen, does it?
"Doesn't it?"
No, he's in the Riverlands when he sees her.
I thought he was standing vigil over Tywin's body.
No, I'm pretty sure he's in the Riverlands. Well, we'll have to pay attention. We'll get there.
Okay, never
We'll
mind.
have to look for that. We'll have to look for that. But if maybe it's both. I don't know. We'll have to pay attention.
Lady
Of course,
Thistle or Lizzie or
Tyrion.
anybody know?
Of course, Tyrion has he twice kind of refers to his mother um, in his fever dream, right? With the septas are collecting the dead, and he kind of goes back and forth and it says Shay wasn't there in contrast with his mother, and I mean, there's all sorts of language that sort of implies his mother is one of the septas that is dealing with the dead in King's Landing, right? And of course, we know that there's the quote from the World of Ice and Fire, all of his Tywin smiles belong to her and her alone, right? And of course, somebody gives her a smile, and so anyway. So yeah, and then that creates a parallel with Ned with his fever dream of the King's Guard at the Tower of Joy.
Mm.
It's two scenes, okay. One is a dream, and one is when Cersei comes to see him and stuff while he's standing vigil. Okay,
But it's not Cersei.
okay. Oh, and maybe he sees Cersei and he thinks
Yeah,
that
he
she looks
thought it
like
was Cersei to
Joanna from his
begin with,
vision.
and it was actually his mother. She's
Oh,
like,
we'll have to compare that as to whether he thinks it's Cersei and it's not, or he thinks it's his mother and it's actually Cersei or whatever. But we'll have to take a look at when we get there.
okay,
I mean,
you
I
know
wouldn't
how
be at
my
all
memory
surprised
is. I mean,
and I wouldn't be surprised with George if it's written ambiguously to the point where it could be. Maybe we could even imagine the conversation and whether it could be the other way around of whatever it's presented as well, right? Like
yeah.
it wouldn't be that. It would be a lot like George to one is not Cersei and one is Cersei, but the scenes are almost identical. Okay, interesting.
Yes, I'll definitely have to look that up.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to pay attention to that. Perhaps Stannis Baratheon and the Starks had done. Anyway, my point was. Oh, and of course, I think that Barristan might have a Shara dream and wins as a since
I don't think we'll ever find out, but
well, fair enough. Because we'll never get wins. Is that what you're saying?
yeah,
He's gone almost a year without any progress.
any
Okay.
progress at all. Actually, it's been
Yep.
1,100 pages for even longer than that.
Yeah. Perhaps Stannis Baratheon and the Starks had done him a kindness. They'd spread their tale of incest all over the Seven Kingdoms, so there was nothing left to hide. Why shouldn't I marry Cersei openly and share her bed every night? The dragons always married their sisters. Septons, lords, and small folk had turned a blind eye to the Targaryens for hundreds of years. Let them do the same for House Lannister. It would play havoc with Joffrey's claim to the crown, to be sure, but in the end it had been swords that had won the Iron Throne for Robert, and swords could keep Joffrey there as well, regardless of whose seat he was. We could marry him to Myrcella once we sent Sansa Stark back to her mother. That would show the realm that the Lannisters are above their laws, like gods and Targaryens. The Lannisters are like Targaryens, you say? Have we mentioned Triplet Targaryens episode 5? Cursed. Jaime had decided that he would return Sansa, and the younger girl as well if she could be found. It was not like to win him back his lost honor, but the notion of keeping faith when they all expected betrayal amused him more than he could say. They were riding past a trampled wheat field and a low stone wall when Jaime heard a soft thrum from behind, as if a dozen birds had taken flight at once. "Down!" he shouted, throwing himself against the neck of his horse. The gelding screamed and reared as an arrow took him in the rump. Other shafts went hissing past. Jaime saw Sir Cleos lurch from the saddle, twisting as his foot caught in the stirrup. His palfrey bolted, and Frey was dragged past, shouting, head bouncing against the ground. Jaime's gelding lumbered off ponderously, blowing and snorting in pain. He craned around to look for Brienne. She was still a horse, an arrow lodged in her back and another in her leg, but she seemed not to feel them. He saw her pull her sword and wheel in a circle, searching for the bowman. "Behind the wall," Jaime called, fighting to turn his half-blind mount back toward the fight. The reins were tangled in his damned chains, and the air was full of arrows again. "At them!" he shouted, kicking to show her how it was done. The old sorry horse found a burst of speed from somewhere. Suddenly, they were racing across the wheat field, throwing up clouds of chaff. Jaime had just enough time to think the wench had better follow me before they realized they're being charged by an unarmed man in chains. Then he heard her coming hard behind. Even fall, she shouted as her plow horse thundered by. She brandished her longsword. Tarth! Tarth! A few last arrows sped harmlessly past. Then the bowman broke and ran, the way unsupported bowmen always broke and ran before the charge of knights. Brienne reined up at the wall. By the time Jaime reached her, they had all melted in the wood 20 yards away. Lost your taste for battle? They were running. That's the best time to kill them. She sheathed her sword. Why did you charge? Bowmen are fearless, so long as they can hide behind walls and shoot at you from afar. But if you come at them, they run. They know what will happen when you reach them. You have an arrow in your back, you know, and another in your leg. You ought to let me tend them. You? Hey, Mother Roy.
Hey.
Who else? Who else? The last I saw of Cousin Cleos, his palfrey was using his head to plow a furrow. Though I suppose we ought to find him. He is a Lannister of sorts. Then I found Cleos still tangled in its stirrup. He had an arrow through his right arm and a second in his chest. It was the ground that had done for him. The top of his head was matted with blood and mushy to the touch, pieces of broken bone moving under the skin beneath the pressure of Jaime's hand. Brienne knelt and held his hand. He's still warm. He'll cool soon enough. I want his horse and his clothes. I'm weary of rags and fleas. He was your cousin. The wench was shocked. Was, Jaime agreed. Have no fear. I'm amply provisioned in cousins. I'll have his sword as well. You need someone to share the watches. You can stand a watch without weapons, she rose. Chained to a tree? Perhaps I could. Or perhaps I could make my own bargain with the next lot of outlaws and let them slit that thick neck of yours, wench. I will not harm you, and my name is Brienne, I know. I'll swear an oath not to harm you if that will ease your girlish fears. Your oaths are worthless. You swore an oath to Ares. You haven't cooked anyone in their armor as far as I know. We both want me safe and whole in King's Landing, don't we? He squatted beside Cleos and began to undo his sword belt. Step away from him. Now. Stop that. Jaime was tired. Tired of her suspicions, tired of her insults, tired of her crooked teeth and her broad, spotty face, and that limp, thin hair of hers. Ignoring her protests, he grasped the hilt of his cousin's longsword with both hands, held the corpse down with his foot, and pulled. As the blade slid from the scabbard, he was already pivoting, bringing the sword around and up in a swift, deadly arc. Steel met steel with a ringing, bone-jarring clang. Somehow, Brienne had gotten her own blade out in time. Jaime laughed. Very good, wench. Give me the sword, Kingslayer. Oh, I will. He sprang to his feet and drove at her, the longsword alive in his hands. Brienne jumped back, parrying, but he followed, pressing the attack. No sooner did she turn one cut than the next was upon her. The swords kissed and sprang apart and kissed again. Jaime's blood was singing. This was what he was meant for. He never felt so alive as when he was fighting, with death balanced at every stroke. And with my wrists chained together, the wench may even give me a contest for a time. His chains forced him to use a two-handed grip, though of course the weight and reach were less than if the blade had been a true two-handed greatsword. What did it matter? His cousin's sword was long enough to write an end to this Brienne of Tarth. So hasn't he said that he's only alive in bed and in battle? Isn't that what Cersei says? Something along those lines.
I can't remember.
At some point, it's implied that, or maybe it's Tyrion. One of them remembers that Jaime said he was only felt alive in bed and in battle. So anyway, I'm just pointing out that he's kind of conflated the two in the past, and of course, this is obviously they're already kissing. Anyway.
Well, a couple of weeks ago they had the book club, and it was a Jaime chapter. I ended up having to cut out the miss, but I was talking to Lady Thistle yesterday. The end of the chapter. When Jaime jumps into the bear pit, Jaime is straddling Brienne, and I was talking about gender role reversals, where in general sexual positions, it's typically the woman straddles the man.
Well, and this was going to be traditional here. She's going to straddle him in this one.
Yeah. So I mean, there is a lot of I don't know if innuendo
role
or
reversal.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of sexual hints through the Jaime and Brienne chapters.
Right.
He used his long pole to save her from the water.
This one might be the most. High, low, overhand, he rained down steel upon her. Left, right, backslash, swinging so hard that sparks flew when the swords came together. Upswing, side slash, overhand, always attacking, moving into her, step and slide, strike and step and strike, hacking, slashing, faster, faster, faster. Until, breathless, he stepped back and let the point of the sword fall to the ground, giving her a moment of respite. Not half bad, he acknowledged, for a wench. She took a slow, deep breath, her eyes watching him warily. I would not hurt you, Kingslayer. As if you could. He whirled the blade back up above his head and flew at her again, chains rattling. What happened there?
You kind of.
Are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here. You're roboting.
Okay. Everything.
You got me?
Let me take a look here. Just a minute. Let me try something.
I didn't do it.
Okay, how's that?
That's better.
Am I back? Okay,
Yeah.
I thought it would be. All right. Yeah, I switched dice piece. Where was I? Chains rattling. Jamie cannot have said how long I did that already, right? As if you could. Yeah, I did the part. Jamie cannot have said how long he pressed the attack. It might have been minutes or it might have been hours. Time slept when swords woke. He drove her away from his cousin's corpse, drove her across the road, drove her into the trees. She stumbled once on a route she never saw, and for a moment he thought she was done, but she went to one knee instead of falling and never lost a beat. Her sword leapt up to block a downcut that would have opened her from shoulder to groin. Then she cut at him again and again, fighting her way back to her feet, stroke by stroke.
Hey, before you go any further, it could have been minutes or it might have been hours. Is a hint at lost time.
Okay.
I mean, just the you got to remember, Jamie has been in chains and everything for over a year. He's half a corpse, so maybe any buffering. Yeah, okay.
Payback.
It might hint at maybe a little bit of help on Jamie's side, maybe.
Sure. And we've got the. You do have to wonder every time he chooses a word here. I mean, we know that that the sword is a phallic symbol, but he's also choosing the word stroke by stroke, and there's all the word choice you have to wonder about. Anyway,
yeah.
The dance went on. He pinned her against an oak, cursed as she slipped away, followed her through a shallow brook half choked with fallen leaves. Steel rang, steel sang, steel screamed and sparked and scraped, and the woman started grunting like a sow at every crash. Yet somehow he could not reach her. It was as if she had an iron cage around her that stopped every blow. Not bad at all, he said when he paused for a second to catch his breath circling to her right. For a wench? For a squire, say. A green one. He laughed a ragged, breathless laugh. Come on, my sweetling. The music's still playing. Might I have this dance, my lady? Grunting, she came at him, blade whirling, and suddenly it was Jamie struggling to keep steel from skin. One of her slashes raked across his brow and blood ran down into his right eye. Others take her, and Riverrun as well. His skills had gone to rust and rot in that bloody dungeon. The chains were no great help either. His eye closed, his shoulders were going numb from the jarring they'd taken, and his wrists ached from the weight of chains, manacles, and sword. His longsword grew heavier with every blow, and Jamie knew he was not swinging as quickly as he'd done earlier, nor raising it as high. She is stronger than I am. The realization chilled him. Robert had been stronger than him, to be sure. The White Bull Gerald Hightower as well in his heyday, and Sir Arthur Dane. Amongst the living, Great John Umber was stronger. Strongbow of Crakehall, most likely. Both Cleganes for a certainty. The mountain strength was like nothing human. It did not matter. With speed and skill, Jamie could beat them all. But this was a woman. Huge cow of a woman, to be sure, but even so. By rights, she should be the one wearing down. So Robert dies in the first book. Gerald Hightower dies in the second book, and Arthur is amongst the living in the third book.
I like that.
Instead, she forced him back into the brook again, shouting, "Yield! Throw down the sword!" A slick stone turned under Jamie's foot. As he felt himself falling, he twisted the mischance into a diving lunge. His point scraped past her parry and bit into her upper thigh. A red flower blossomed, and Jamie had an instant to savor the sight of her blood before his knee slammed into a rock. The pain was blinding. Brand splashed into him and kicked away his sword. Yield! So, the sight of her blood, her red flower blossoming. Of course, this reminds me of someone that Jamie says is like him immediately after he says that there's no one like him.
Well, he struck her in the thigh with his phallic sword.
Yep.
Popping something.
Right. And he was just talking about how she's a maiden, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Jaime drove his shoulder into her legs, bringing her down on top of him. They rolled, kicking and punching until finally she was sitting astride him. He managed to jerk her dagger from its sheath, but before he could plunge it into her belly, she caught his wrist and slammed his hand back on a rock so hard he thought she'd wrenched an arm from its socket. So this is a parallel with Dunk, by the way.
Yeah.
Her other hand spread across his face. Yield! She shoved his head down, held it under, pulled it up. Yield! Jaime spit water into her face. A shove, a splash, and he was under again, kicking uselessly, fighting to breathe. Up again. Yield or I'll drown you! And break your oath? He snarled. Like me? She let him go, and he went down with a splash, and the woods rang with coarse laughter. Brienne lurched to her feet. She was all mud and blood below the waist, her clothing askew, her face red. She looks as if they caught us fucking instead of fighting. Imagine that. I wonder why. Jaime crawled over the rocks to shallow water, wiping the blood from his eye with his chained hands. Armed men lined both sides of the brook. Small wonder we were making enough noise to wake a dragon. Well met, friends, he called to them amiably. My pardons if I disturbed you. You caught me chastising my wife. Seemed to me she was doing the chastising. The man who spoke was thick and powerful. The nasal bar of his iron half-helm did not wholly conceal his lack of a nose. These were not the outlaws who had killed Sir Cleos, Jaime realized suddenly. The scum of the earth surrounded them. Swarthy Dornishmen and blonde Liceni, Dothraki with bells in their braids, hairy Ibonese, coal-black summer islanders in feathered cloaks. He knew them, the brave companions. It's always interesting to me that technically Tywin is the one who first convinces Dothraki to cross the poison waters. Anyway.
Yeah.
Brienne found her voice. I have 100 stags. A cadaverous man in a tattered leather cloak said, We'll take that for a start, milady. Then we'll have your cunt, said the noseless man. It can't be as ugly as the rest of you. Turn her over and rape her arse, Rorge, urged a Dornish spearman with a red silk scarf wound about his helm. That way you won't need to look at her. And rob her of the pleasure of looking at me? Noseless said, and the others laughed. Ugly and stubborn though she might be, the wench deserved better than to be gang raped by such refuse as these. Who commands here? Jaime demanded loudly. I have that honor, Sir Jaime. The cadaver's eyes were rimmed in red, his hair thin and dry. Dark blue veins could be seen through the pallid skin of his hands and face. Urswick I am, called Urswick the Faithful. So Urswick's interesting. He's leading what's left of the Bloody Mummers to Old Town, presumably to seek passage, but I do wonder if they will distract the guards at the worst possible time. As in, they might get there and kind of cause a commotion, right, as Old Town is under attack from Euron, potentially.
I didn't think about that.
That's just a thought. You know who I am? The sellsword inclined his head. Takes more than a beard and a shaved head to deceive the brave companions. The Bloody Mummers, you mean? Jaime had no more use for these than he did for Gregor Clegane or Amory Lorch. Dogs, his father called them all, and he used them like dogs to hound his prey and put fear in their hearts. If you know me, Urswick, you know you'll have your reward. A Lannister always pays his debts. As for the wench, she's highborn and worth a good ransom. The other cocked his head. Is it so? How fortunate. There was something sly about the way Urswick was smiling that Jaime did not like. You heard me. Where's the goat? A few hours distant. He'll be pleased to see you, I have no doubt. But I would not call him a goat to his face. Lord Vargo grows prickly about his dignity. Since when has that slobbering savage had dignity? I'll be sure and remember that when I see him. Lord of what, pray? Harrenhal. Quiet. It has been promised. Harrenhal? Has my father taken leave of his senses? Jaime raised his hands. I'll have these chains off. Urswick's chuckle was papery dry. Something is very wrong here. Jaime gave no sign of his discomfiture, but only smiled. Did I say something amusing? Noseless grinned. You're the funniest thing I've seen since Biter chewed that Septa's teats off. You and your father lost too many battles, offered the Dornishman. We had to trade our lion pelts for wolf skins. Urswick spread his hands. What Timian means to say is that the brave companions are no longer in the hire of House Lannister. We now serve Lord Bolton and the King in the North. Jaime gave him a cold, contemptuous smile. And men say I have shit for honor. Urswick was unhappy with that comment. At his signal, two of the mummers grasped Jaime by the arms, and Boris drove a mailed fist into his stomach. As he doubled over, grunting, he heard the wench protesting. Stop! He's not to be harmed. Lady Catelyn sent us as an exchange of captives. He's under my protection. Gorge hit him again, driving the air from his lungs. Brienne dove for her sword beneath the waters of the brook, but the mummers were on her before she could lay hands on it. Strong as she was, it took 4 of them to beat her into submission. By the end, the wench's face was as swollen and bloody as Jaime's must have been. They'd knocked out 2 of her teeth. It did nothing to improve her appearance. Stumbling and bleeding, the 2 captives were dragged back through the woods to the horses, Brienne limping from the thigh wound he'd given her in the brook. Jaime felt sorry for her. She would lose her maidenhood tonight, he had no doubt. That noseless bastard would have her for a certainty. Some of the others would likely take a turn. The Dornishmen bound them back to back atop Brienne's plow horse, while the other mummers were stripping Cleos Frey to his skin to divvy up his possessions. Rorsch won the blood-stained surcoat with its proud Lannister and Frey quarterings. The arrows had punched holes through lions and towers alike. I hope you're pleased, wench, Jaime whispered at Brienne. He coughed and spat out a mouth full of blood. If you'd armed me, we'd never have been taken. She made no answer. There's a pig-stubborn bitch. But brave, yes. He could not take that from her. When we make camp for the night, you'll be raped, and more than once, he warned her. You'd be wise not to resist. If you fight them, you'll lose more than a few teeth. He felt Brienne's back stiffen against his. Is that what you would do if you were a woman? If I were a woman, I'd be Cersei. If I were a woman, I'd make them kill me. But I'm not. Jaime kicked their horse to a trot. Urswick, a word. Now, actually, he's wrong here, by the way. If he were a woman, he'd be Brienne.
True.
The cadaverous sellsword and the ragged leather cloak reined up a moment, then fell in beside him. What would you have of me, sir? And mind your tongue, or I'll chastise you again. Gold, said Jaime. You do like gold. Urswick studied him through reddened eyes. It has its uses, I do confess. Jaime gave Urswick a knowing smile. All the gold in Casterly Rock. Why let the goat enjoy it? Why not take us to King's Landing and collect my ransom for yourself? Hers as well, if you like. Tarth is called the Sapphire Isle. A maiden told me once. The wench squirmed at that, but said nothing. Do you take me for a turncloak? Certainly. What else? For half a heartbeat, Urswick considered the proposition. King's Landing is a long way, and your father is there. Lord Tywin may resent us for selling Harrenhal to Lord Bolton. He's cleverer than he looks. Jaime had been looking forward to hanging the wretch while his pockets bulged with gold. Leave me to deal with my father. I'll get you a royal pardon for any crimes you've committed. I'll get you a knighthood. Sir Urswick, the man said, savoring the sound. How proud my dear wife would be to hear it. If only I hadn't killed her, he sighed. And what of brave Lord Vargo? Shall I sing you a verse of the reigns of Castamere? The goat won't be quite so brave when my father gets hold of him. And how will he do that? Are your father's arms so long that they can reach over the walls of Harrenhal and pluck us out? If need be, King Harren's monstrous folly had fallen before, and it could fall again. Are you such a fool as to think the goat can outfight the lion? Urswick leaned over and slapped him lazily across the face. The sheer casual insolence of it was worse than the blow itself. He does not fear me, Jaime realized with a chill. I've heard enough, Kingslayer. I would have to be a great fool indeed to believe the promises of an oath-breaker like you. He kicked his horse and galloped smartly ahead. Ares, Jaime thought resentfully. It always turns on Ares. He swayed with the motion of his horse, wishing for a sword. 2 swords would be even better. One for the wench and one for me. We die, but we take half of them down to hell with us. Why did you tell him Tarth was the Sapphire Isle? Brienne whispered when Urswick was out of earshot. He's like to think my father's rich in gemstones. You best pray he does. Is every word you say a lie, Kingslayer? Tarth is called the Sapphire Isle for the blue of its waters. Shout it a little louder, wench. I don't think Urswick heard you. The sooner they know how little you're worth in ransom, the sooner the rapes begin. Every man here will mount you. What do you care? Just close your eyes, open your legs, and pretend they're all Lord Renly. Mercifully, that shut her mouth for a time. The day was almost done by the time they found Vargo Hoat, sacking a small sept with another dozen of his brave companions. The leaded windows had been smashed, the carved wooden gods dragged out into the sunlight. The fattest Dothraki Jaime had ever seen was sitting on the mother's chest. They rode up, prying out her Chalcedony eyes with the point of his knife. I had to look that up because I didn't know how to pronounce it. It's not at all how I would have pronounced it if I hadn't looked it up. Nearby, a skinny, balding septon hung upside down from the limb of a spreading chestnut tree. 3 of the brave companions were using his corpse for an archery butt. One of them must have been good. The dead man had arrows through both of his eyes. There's something there that kind of stuck out at me. Oh, they dragged them out into the sunlight. That almost makes them sound like they fear the sun, doesn't it? Like the gods fear the sun. Which would kind of make them others, and we get all those crystal imagery that the Order of the Green Hand has argued that the Septons are in league with the others, essentially. That the faith of the Seven seems to be serving the others, or at least has the symbolism that associates it with the others.
Well, I mean, to drag it out into the sunlight would be to take it out of the shadows.
Right.
So yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. So anyway, I just noticed that right there, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. When the sellsword spied Urswick and the captives, the cry went up in half a dozen tongues. The goat was seated by a cook fire, eating a half-cooked bird off a skewer, grease and blood running down his fingers into his long, stringy beard. He wiped his hands on his tunic and rose. King Slayer, he slobbed, you are my captive. My lord, I am Brienne of Tarth, the wench called out. Lady Catelyn Stark commanded me to deliver Sir Jaime to his brother at King's Landing. The goat gave her a disinterested glance. Silence her. Hear me, Brienne entreated as Rourge cut the ropes that bound her to Jaime. In the name of the king in the north, the king you serve, please listen. Rourge dragged her off the horse and began to kick her. See that you don't break any bones, Urswick called out to him. The horse-faced bitch is worth her weight in sapphires. The Dornishman Timian and a foul-smelling Ibonese pulled Jaime down from the saddle and shoved him roughly toward the cook fire. It would not have been hard for him to have grasped one of their sword hilts as they manhandled him, but there were too many, and he was still in feathers. He might cut down one or two, but in the end he would die for it. Jaime was not ready to die just yet, and certainly not for the likes of Brienne of Tarth. Not ready just yet to die for her, but mayhaps a bit later. This is the sweet day, Bargohout said. Around his neck hung a chain of linked coins of every shape and size, cast and hammered, bearing the likenesses of kings, wizards, gods, and demons, and all manner of fanciful beasts. Coins from
every time you talk as the goat,
yeah.
I think of suffering psychopaths.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It brings a smile to my face.
Coins from every land where he has fought, Jaime remembered. Greed was the key to this man. If he was turned once, he can be turned again. Lord Vargo, you were foolish to leave my father's service, but it's not too late to make amends. You'll pay well for me, you know it. Oh, yes, said Bargohout. Half the gold in Catherley Rock, I shall have it. But first, I must send him a message. He said something in his slithery, goatish tongue. Urswick shoved him in the back, and a jester in green and pink motley kicked his legs out from under him. When he hit the ground, one of the archers grabbed the chain between Jaime's wrists and used it to yank his arms out in front of him. The fat Dothraki put aside his knife to unsheath a huge curved arc, the wickedly sharp scythe sword the horse lords loved. They mean to scare me. The fool hopped on Jaime's back, giggling, as the Dothraki swaggered toward him. The goat wants me to piss my breeches and beg his mercy, but will never have that pleasure. He was a Lannister of Castle Rock, Lord Commander of the King's Guard. No sellsword would make him scream. Sunlight ran silver along the edge of the Eric as it came shivering down, almost too fast to see, and Jaime screamed. Up next, Storm 22, Arya 4. I'm sorry I tore the acorn dress too.
Did you catch that? That was pre-planned.
The fact that they already know exactly what to do without him giving any commands.
Yes.
So they knew what was going to happen to him if he captured them.
Exactly.
Now, it could be that any time he captures a great swordsman, he immediately cuts off their sword hand. That's possible because Jaime doesn't think that he needs any reason to do this. That this is what he does. Like Jaime believes that this is what happens to Vargo's prisoners. And we've been told that he likes to cut off people's feet and hands. But Roose tells us that it was deliberate because he didn't want Roose to be able to go back over, right?
And then there's the theory that the Bloody Mummers were created by Oberon, that this was all a plan of the long game.
Right. It's all about making sure that the Kingsguard doesn't have adequate fighters, essentially.
Right, but the people that did the deed are the same ones that found him. So if they were going to go ahead and cut his hand off, I mean, why not cut it off there? I just think it's odd that no order was given, and the hand is gone.
Right. Yeah. So either they've already discussed, well, what do we do if we find the Kingslayer, which is one possibility,
or it was just standard practice,
or a standard practice. Yeah.
Yeah, but then you have all the Northmen that didn't miss any hands and feet, and like we said, if we haven't seen it on the page,
Right,
uh,
and Arya even mentioned that was seemed kind of strange, and then of course we're supposed to realize that means he's turning his cloak at that point, right?
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I don't know, and of course one of the problems with conspiracies is that the conspiracies could even be informed by people who can see the future. Finally, the goat brings a smile to someone's face, and they may have had someone ride ahead to inform the goat. Yeah, it's possible too that they'd already had. It might not be that they pre-planned this. It may be that they planned it shortly before this happens. That's also possible.
right. But in George's fashion, it could kind of be read a couple of different ways. It's less about what George put into the scene. It's more about the reader, me,
Yeah,
you, Lizzie, all coming up with a different take on it. It's what you put into the scene or get out of the scene.
yeah, and as I as we were kind of talking a little bit about the Book of the New Sun, it's people there are still coming up with new theories 40 years later. I was listening to the Rereading Wolf podcast, and these are guys that have been following have been theorizing about the Book of the New Sun since like the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Maybe even the 80s, because they may have read it when it first came out, but 82, I think, something like that. Right? Early 80s is when it came out, right? But anyway, they've
80s
been
are the best.
well they've been thinking about this for 40 years. They're going through, they get they bring on a guest, and they're like, you have this theory that now totally changes, and it as of that moment they completely changed their entire interpretation of the books.
Oh
Like,
wow.
yeah, well, I mean, it was based on the last paragraph of the fourth, the final of the original series.
Mm.
The very last paragraph, you're it's definitely, it becomes more and more about time travel, and specifically the time travel of the main character, who's the boy who goes on to become the king, right? Who's
Uh,
the
Wait a
main
minute. This
character.
sounds kind of
I,
familiar. I
I
don't
know it
know.
sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? And it
Yeah.
becomes more and more about time travel, and then the last paragraph, it says that
So the
he's
guy went into the past and copied George R. Martin, but in the past.
yeah, and then he convinced George that when he died, he should claim that he was his mentor. Yeah, it's funny how that
Exactly.
works. Anyway, but um, but um, and every book is two nouns, an article, and a preposition, and the appendix is at the end of each book, but it's about the facts as they stand at the beginning of each book, and et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, and there's a 700-foot tall wall, and the importance of black cloaks, and
Look, I'm already
and a
sold.
coin to mark you. And a coin to mark you as being a member of the group, and anyway.
Look, I had the opportunity to buy a completely separate Christmas gift for myself yesterday, and I opted not to do it to do where I could get this book series.
Well, they apparently hadn't really considered the last paragraph of the original series and what its implications really meant about how the time travel worked. And they're
Uh,
like, oh, 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 we gotta pay attention to everything now.
now they go back and reread everything.
Oh, exactly. So then they
Yeah.
had, I mean, and it's still early in the first book when they had this guest on, and so they're like, okay, so they talked through the first parts of what that might mean,
Yeah.
and anyway, yeah, it's but just the fact that like experts who've been studying it for like 40 years are like suddenly, oh, our entire interpretation of how the time travel works is different if we pay careful attention to the very last paragraph of the original series. Oh, oh.
I mean, George also puts information that you need in really
Right,
odd places.
afterwards,
Yep.
absolutely, or afterwards, and then you go back and right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, your enthusiasm over the book has sold me. So yeah, that's my Christmas present to myself is that book
Yeah.
series. And I famously have not read any other books since a Song of Ice and Fire. I can't get into it. I've tried. I've tried the Dragon Bone chair or something. I just can't get
Well,
into it. The
when
writing
when when
style.
when the main character tells you that his memory is like unchanging or perfect or whatever, pay careful attention to the very next thing he says, because it's the opposite of what he should remember just happened.
Right. Well, I mean, I have
he's gonna
learned my
he's gonna tell you,
lesson.
I have a perfect memory, and then my companion, who was the one who did this, and you're like, no, he's not. It's
Well, I
like,
mean,
wait, what?
George has taught me the errors of my way. I know I need to read slower. I know I need
Yeah,
to pay
yeah,
more
yeah.
attention to the little things.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
I need
But
to
it's
read with
it's it's
highlighters.
literally the very next thing he tells you of
Mhm.
my companion, who was the one who, I can't remember exactly what the details are, but it's like my companion, and he so and so who was the one who did this or said this earlier, and then like, no, he's not.
Well, I mean,
No, he's not.
uh,
And
the implication is, and I thought this is how you explained it to me. Reading these books may help you with
uh-huh.
George's books.
Well, it explains
Find out.
how his mentor believed you should write things and make them for rereading, right? And therefore, it may also inform how George is doing things as well.
Right. And then I just saw it popped up on Google that the last interview with George, he was doing a podcast, and he's like, the 1,100 pages. I'm having a hard time. It's very difficult, and
Mhm.
I'm like, ah, quit giving
Yeah.
interviews. Just write, right, monkey, right.
Well,
Pod
he
needs
needs to
the
do
stealing.
something to get inspired. He needs to do something to get inspired, and that may include, doing something else or whatever.
Hey,
But taking a break.
if Pod kidnaps him again, have him reread the book series
The Book of the New Sun, yeah, yeah.
yeah, the
Pod's
book of the
Pod's
new son.
a
Have
big
him
fan of.
reread that. Yeah,
Yeah,
Pod.
yeah.
Let him know.
I do
When I
I
call
do
him,
think that as they change their understanding of how time travel works, I'm like, oh, one of the things they said is that they think that every time there's a, you should try crafting with us on Discord.
yep,
Every
send him a
that
message, Lizzie.
they mentioned that they think every time there's this mist that the universe is potentially becoming a different universe of the multiverse or whatever, different path. And I'm sitting there thinking, huh, because people have talked about the dreams and there being this mist, and of course people associate that with, um, that was Flores, not me. She just tries to implicate me. Um,
Yeah. Well, she did get Lady Thistle to record that conversation, so. Uh, well,
well,
I mean,
and we're
isn't
long
doesn't
past the
Tyrion
date that
go through a
George.
mist when they do that second time around underneath the Bridge of Sorrows?
Right. But people have been talking about the dreams, and of course they say that Bloodraven is sending them. Well, one of the things that they managed to realize that it was, oh, all the things we thought were the other people that might be doing time travel are actually Severian. Well, we're thinking that maybe all the things that people think are Bloodraven are actually Bran, right? And Bran,
Yeah.
whenever there's a dream that people think is Bloodraven, which maybe is actually Bran, I think there's a specific mist that appears in those dreams.
We definitely have to
Uh,
watch that.
yeah. So anyway,
I have to go to
so
the word
that kind of
search.
clicked when because I remember specifically hearing people think that when Bloodraven is sending dreams that there's this mist, and they were literally just realizing, oh, all these people we thought were in charge of the time travel, they're not. It's Severian who's doing all the time travel. The first Severian, he talks about how, we were talking right before this started about how the time travel mechanics in the Book of the New Sun are such that you create an alternative universe, and so you still remember everything. You're not affected by your changes to your own past. A different you is affected by the changes to your past, and so that the implication there, and he says there was a first Severian, and this is the stuff that was in common, the stuff that wasn't, and he explains a little bit about how at the very end of the book he explains how what the difference is between the first Severian and himself, right,
Mm-hmm.
and what was different about their stories, and so that means that the time travel doesn't work the way you see it in movies, where when you change things, it also changes you. It works that you create an alternative universe. I don't know if that's the case with Bran, but maybe it is, right? So we're seeing the version of Bran where Hodor has already been altered, right?
Right.
But maybe it's a different Bran that does that, or probably not though. I think George is probably going to do it like like in the movies, essentially, like in most fiction, where Bran's past is changed by himself. Partially because I think he's more representative of God the Father rather than God the Son.
Basically, Brandon Leaping is using the butterfly effect, right?
Right.
He's making a change, and then once the change is made, he comes back and goes,
right. That's
okay,
what I think it is.
I need to do this also. Okay,
and that's not what they're saying the Book of the New Sun is. They're saying the Book of the New Sun actually is created a second Severian by him changing his past, and so the Severian we're seeing is the one who's been changed. But there's this first Severian who initiated the changes, and so the point being that no, it's not the people you thought were messing with him that are messing with him. The first version of him, is messing with him, and so they were claiming that the Trinity represents that the Catholic imagery in the Trinity that they're doing. God the Father is the first Severian, and God the Son is the second Severian, and then Thecla and maybe even also Thea and Catherine are the Holy Spirit. So that was their argument. And Thecla is probably the coolest character in the story, in that she might be the only female that's actually a real person. he's not George. He's not good at writing female characters. But Thecla is definitely kind of manipulating him and kind of does love him, and we kind of learn that she really, well, he has to cannibal eat someone in order to gain power, and so he learns, he's able to see into her thoughts in the past. Yeah, she's Jojen Paste.
Okay. All right, before you ruin any more of the story for me.
yeah, we better sign off.
On the loss of time in the Jaime and Brienne love scene. The reason, I just thought of this, the reason that there could be some random leaping help on Jaime's part is because he's been in chains for a year and in a dungeon, malnourished and all that stuff. Brienne should have made short work of him.
His horse may have gotten a boost too, you noticed.
Well, this is true. The reason for the fight needed to last long enough for the brave companions to find them to where Jaime could be put on his path of redemption and you know what I mean? If the fight ended quickly and she got him back on the horse and they left, the brave companions might not have found them. And they needed to find them so Jaime could lose his sword hand, lose his identity, and then slowly turn into Jaime the Golden Hand, savior of us all. Hallowed be his name. Pod
says you could try reading some of the books and authors George uses inspiration. Elric of Melniboné, this should be an R, not an either. But Call of Cthulhu, etc. I just ran out of time for more. Yeah, and some of those are. Yeah, I know. That's why I said Elric. I knew what you meant. So Elric is interesting. One of the things that's interesting about Elric is that Moorcock doesn't always. It's always the same person, but it's not always Elric in his stories. Like, I mean, a lot of his stories are Elric of Melniboné, but Elric is what's the term? The universal hero or something. Anyway, it actually is taking place in a multiverse, and so there actually are other versions of Elric in alternative universes that he also writes about. So one of the things I find interesting about that is the Azor Ahai being multiple people, while Elric is kind of multiple people as well. And Elric is Bloodraven is heavily influenced by Elric, and then in terms of Call of Cthulhu and stuff, you definitely have those same influences of like the deep ones and such in the Book of the New Sun and other Gene Ray or Gene Wolfe other Gene Wolfe stories. He's definitely heavily influenced by that as well.
Okay. All right, we're getting close to our hour.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Follow up of following up a Jaime chapter, which is a good chapter, we have an Arya chapter, which is even better.
Even
Well,
better. How's
yeah,
that
well, I
possible?
mean, come on. I mean, it's Arya.
Yeah, I mean, Arya's probably my favorite. I'm just
I
surprised
know
to
I'm a
hear you
Jaime
say that.
ship.
I
I
thought you were
mean,
Mr. Jamie. I'm just shocked
yeah,
that
yeah.
you're saying
Well,
that.
look,
I'm not disagreeing by any means.
you can ask Chris the Crow. Once I find a good joke, I stick with it through thick or thin, high or water. So I do not like Jaime as much as I pretend to. Granted, he's one of my
Okay.
favorite characters, but it's not like I would give him my maidenhead or anything like that. Any of the stuff that I joke about, um, if truth was to be told, if I had to pick between Jaime and the Hound, I probably would pick the Hound, even though Pod can't stand either one of them. That's why I used him as a reference. But I mean, yeah, do I like me some Jaime? Yes, I like me some Jaime. But it's he's not the end all be all. But
All right, fair enough.
that being said, all right, I appreciate everybody joining us today. Thank you very much. I could not jump on the chat yesterday because I had to pick up Carter from school. But at 2 o'clock my time, which wouldn't give him
Wouldn't
my
give him my
maidenhead.
maidenhead, according to you or Littlefinger.
Well, I mean, are we going to split hairs on this? I couldn't jump on yesterday for afternoon chat, but I can today. Be 2 o'clock my time, 1 o'clock Lady Thistle's time. For reference, it's 1 o'clock my time now. So in an hour, I'll be jumping on Discord to be able to chat. So, but thank y'all for joining us. We appreciate it. We will see you Friday for Aria 4. Is it Aria always leading the chapter count?
I
She
think
hits
so.
4, then everybody else hits
I think
4.
she might in this one. Yeah.
Okay. She is George's wife's favorite character, correct?
Yes, and we have both. Despite what. Thank you guys. Like the video. Yeah.
Thank you,
But
Lindsay.
despite what you may have seen on like 4 of the last 5 Maester Monthly podcasts, he very much has stated that. We've got a Cosmo article with Macy Williams quotes him as having said that, and there's a YouTube link that I've occasionally posted that shows him, that has him specifically saying that Arya, that she has a favorite character that he's not allowed to kill, and given that he told Maisie who that was and what he said, he told Maisie it was Arya, right? So anyway, yes.
Lizzie, if you can, even if you can't stay on the whole time, in an hour, jump on. I got a question to ask you. And you know me, I don't like texting for crap, so I just soon ask you. But we will see everybody else Friday, same bat time, same bat channel. We appreciate it. Y'all have the good rest of your week and take care. Bye, Richard.
Have a good
Bye,
one.
everybody.